Without Austria, the German Confederation ceased to exist, but it was soon replaced. In August of 1866, following a series of treaties between Prussia and its allies, a new alliance began to emerge. On February 24th of 1867, the Reichstag of the North German Confederation held its first session. It comprised Prussia, its allies, and the states it had annexed after the German War. However, contrary to the German Confederation, it was a confederation in name only. It had a proper constitution, and despite outwardly appearing to be a loose union, the presidency was automatically held by the King of Prussia. The flag of the North German Confederation, black, white, and red, combined the colors of the Hanseatic League with the flag of Prussia, further emphasizing Prussian dominance. Bismarck was one step closer to a unified German Empire. However, south of the Main River, there were still the Grand Duchies of Hesse-Darmstadt and Baden, and the kingdoms of Bavaria and Württemberg. Those four states had sided with Austria during the German War, and thus were not part of the North German Confederation. Without Austria to protect them, however, the southern German states fell more and more under the influence of Prussia. By the end of the year, all of them had entered military alliances with the North German Confederation. On the other side of the Rhine, the Emperor of the French was watching the unfolding unification of Germany with growing concern. Napoleon III had fallen on hard times. After a string of failures in his expansionist foreign policy, including a costly but fruitless attempt to re-establish the Mexican Empire, the French public was beginning to turn on him. To make up for the disappointing result of the German War, he demanded Prussia's support in a bid to annex Luxembourg, but was snubbed. This soured the relationship between the two countries even further. In September of 1868, Isabella II, Queen of Spain, was deposed in a coup d'état. With the Spanish throne now vacant, the rebels around Generals Juan Prim and Francisco Serrano Dominguez were looking for a suitable successor. Eventually they settled on Leopold, Prince of Hohenzollern, a member of the Swabian line of the Prussian royal family. France saw this as both an insult and a threat. Even though Leopold was more closely related to Napoleon than William, France dreaded the prospect of being surrounded by Hohenzollern rulers. The French protested heavily, with the French Foreign Minister Agénor de Grammont even hinting at war. In an address to the French Parliament, he stated,
"The French will not abide the accession of the Prince of Hohenzollern or any other Prussian prince to the Spanish throne. If things would come to pass any other way, we would, with your support and that of the nation, do our duty without weakness or hesitation."
Faced with such pressure, Leopold was forced to decline in July of 1870. Still, the French were not satisfied and demanded further concessions from Prussia, like the guarantee that no Hohenzollern would ever be a candidate for the throne of Spain. The King of Prussia, who was residing in the small Rhineland town of Bad Ems at the time, was presented these demands by the French diplomat Vincent Benedetti. William sternly declined to commit to a course of action that would restrict his foreign policy in such a way. After Benedetti had departed, William had a report of the incident telegraphed to Bismarck. In turn, Bismarck released an edited version of the so-called Ems dispatch to the press. By changing the wording, he made it appear that Benedetti had been more rude in his demands, and that William had been more brash in his rejection. A mistranslation by the French press further reinforced this impression, and it was enough to rile up the French public, who now demanded outright war. Meanwhile, in the face of French aggression, German nationalism flared up again, as it had 60 years before, when the German states had united against Napoleon I. Now both the French Empire and the North German Confederation started to mobilize, and on July 19th, France declared war. At first, Napoleon was confident. He counted on the support of the southern German states, as well as Austria and Italy. However, the southern German states honored their treaties with Prussia and put their troops under Prussian command. Austria, meanwhile, remained neutral. Their territorial interests had shifted towards Eastern Europe, so there was not much to gain in a war to the west, especially against the full might of a united Germany. The war did not start off well for the French either. After a brief incursion into the Saarland, the French were beaten back and suffered decisive defeats at Wissembourg, Wörth, and Metz. On September 1st, the French suffered another catastrophic defeat in the Battle of Sedan, where a staggering 100,000 Frenchmen were captured, including Napoleon himself. Bismarck hoped that this would bring a quick end to the war. He was mistaken. After news of Napoleon's capture had reached Paris, the Second Empire was overthrown and replaced by the Third Republic. Louis-Jules Trochu, the new French leader, vowed to continue the war, but after the defeat at Sedan, it was already decided in the Germans' favor. On September 19th, German troops laid siege to Paris. 3 months later, the French Republic surrendered. Napoleon never recovered from the loss of his empire. When he died in his British exile 3 years later, his last words reportedly were,
"Is it not true that we were not cowards at Sedan,